Hello everyone, welcome back to the course. In this video lecture, we're going to look at data definition language. Data definition language consists of SQL commands that defines the database schema. Examples of these commands include create, drop, alter. So we'll start by looking at what SQL create statement does. So SQL create statement can be used to create database and tables. Let's look at SQL create constraints. SQL constraints are used to specify roles for data in a table. Examples of SQL constraints: not null. This ensures that a column cannot have a null value. Unique. This ensures that all values in a column are distinct. Primary key. This uniquely identifies each row in a table. A primary key is a combination of not null and unique. Foreign key. This establishes a relationship between two tables, ensures that the value in one table corresponds to a value in another. Check. This ensures that column values meet a specified condition. Default. This assigns a default value to a column if no value is provided during data insertion. Create index. This provides the speed of which data retrieval by creating indexes on columns. Having looked at some of these create constraints, let us now proceed with create database statement. Create database statement is used to create a new database into the server. So this is the syntax for create database. Create database, then followed by database name. So we can do this practically on MySQL Workbench. We are on MySQL Workbench. Under Navigator, when you go to schema column, you should be able to see a list of databases that exists. So we're going to use create statement to create our database. So create database, then the name of our database. SQL, it's not case sensitive. You can also use small letters for the SQL statement, but it will still work. But I prefer using caps lock for the statements. So let's run this. Execute. So when you go to the output down here, you can see one row affected. Then we have a tick here showing us that that was successful. And if we refresh the schema, you see we now have the school and we don't have the tables yet. So that's how we create the database on MySQL. Now let's look at another create statement, that is create table. Create table. This is used to create a new table in a database. We can have a look at the syntax. So this is the syntax. You have the create table followed by the table name, then inside the bracket, so you include the columns and respective data types. We can now have a look at this on MySQL Workbench, where we can do this practically. Before we proceed creating tables in our database school, we need to define the database that we want to use. So we do so by using the use statement followed by the database name. So school. We can run this. So that is a successful run. So now we can proceed to start creating our tables. We're going to create a student table that has student ID column and student name column. So let's begin by writing the statement create table followed by the table name students. Then inside the brackets we are going to include our columns. So we have student ID. This is going to be an integer, and also our primary key in this table. You remember we looked at what a primary key is. So a primary key is a unique identifier in a table, and in this case a primary key is both unique and not null. So it has both unique and not null create SQL constraints. So this is our primary key, and we are going to include auto increment on this to automate the assigning of student ID, so that it will not be necessary for us to assign the student ID. But in a scenario where we have unique student IDs already defined, maybe in that scenario we won't need to have this as an auto increment if we'll need to key in the student IDs. So we have another column, student name. So we're going to set the data type as varchar with 100 characters, and also set this to not null. So with this we can now run the SQL create statement so that we can create the student table. So let's run this. So it's a successful run. So if we go to the schema and check or try to refresh the schema, we'll see that right now we have a table that has been included, that is the students table. So you can proceed and create another table, create table courses. So inside the bracket we include the columns. So we'll have the course ID, this will be an integer. We can set this as the primary key and also to auto increment. Then we can add course name. This is going to be varchar 100 characters limit, and we set it to not null. We can also run this so that we can create our course table. So I'm going to run this, execute. So that is a successful run. So if we refresh the schema, we should be able now to see the courses table included. We can do the same for units, or we can as well copy this to save on time. Then we change this to units. Then this should be unit ID. This should be unit name. So we can run this as well. That's a successful run, and if we refresh we'll be able to see the units table included. So now we're going to add our last table, that is registration, which is going to have some relationship with the three tables that we've already created. So let's create this table, create table registration. So include the columns. We start with registration ID. This will be an integer, and we set this to primary key and auto increment. Then we'll include student ID column, student ID. Remember, this is a primary key in students table, so we're going to set it as not null. So we have to reference this to students table, so we're going to set it as a foreign key. So student ID, so this is the foreign key. Then we reference it to students. student ID column. So this student ID column is in the students table. Okay, so next is course ID. We're going to set it as an integer and not null. We can as well set this as a foreign key, so I'm just going to copy this and paste it here and apply the same for course ID as our foreign key. So this should be referencing the courses table, course ID. Then we do the same to unit ID. Set also the unit ID as a foreign key. This should be referencing units table. This should be units ID column. Then we're missing a comma there. So we can now select this and run this. So that's a successful run. If we refresh the schema, you will notice that we now have registrations table, and for this particular table it has foreign keys included. So that's how we create tables on MySQL. The next statement we are going to look is the drop table statement. This is used to delete a table from a database. The syntax for this statement, drop table followed by the table name that we want to delete or that we want to remove from the database. We can have a look at this on MySQL Workbench. To delete a table from our database, we're going to use the drop statement. So drop followed by drop table followed by the name of the table that we want to drop. So in this case, we can drop the registration table. So you can drop this. Okay, we should be able to say this table deleted from our database. So I'm going to highlight this and run this command. So as you can see, we have a success on the drop table registrations. So right now, if we go and refresh our database schema and go to our tables, we are not able to see the registrations table, meaning our drop table statement has worked as expected. Now let's look at drop database. Drop database statement, it's used to remove database from the server. The syntax for drop database include the statement drop database followed by the name of the database. Drop database is no different from drop table, so it's almost similar. So this is a drop database. Then we have to enter the name of the database that we want to drop or delete. So it's the school database. It's going to delete the whole database that consists of the tables that we created. So let me run this. I've selected that. Let me run it. Notice that on the schema, we don't see the database code listed. The good thing is that we have these codes here already. So if we run these codes together till this point, we should be able to do all the SQL commands that we did before, that is going to create the database and the tables in it at a go. So let me run this so that we can reinstate the database. So as you can see, we have run this successfully, and if we refresh the schema, you see we have the school database and all the tables have been reinstated. Now let's have a look at alter table. So for alter table, this is used to add, delete or modify columns in an existing table. So the syntax for alter table can be as follows. So the alter table statements begin followed by the table name that we want to make alterations to. you can include the actions. So for this case, we want to add a column. So we include add, then the column name that we want to add together with its data type. So let's look at alter table statements on MySQL Workbench. So we'll start by adding a column on table students using the alter table statement. So let's come here and type alter table, then the table name that we want to alter, that is students. So we want to add another column to this. So add, then the column name, admission date. We can give it a data type as date. So if we run this, it should add another column to our table students. So let me run that. So it's a successful run. So let's come to students on our schema, then go to columns, and you will realize right now we have the admission date added as a column. We can as well drop the column if we wish to, or before we apply dropping the column, drop column is going to delete the column that we've just created. So instead of deleting this column, let's first try to rename the admission date column to something else. We are going to use the change clause on alter table to rename a column on a table. So to do this, let's start by writing the alter statement, alter table students. Then we can include the change clause. Then of course you can include the old column. In this scenario, it's the admission date. We want to change this to admission year, so followed by the new column name. We can give the new column name a new variable, a new data type. So you can set the varchar to a limit of 255 characters. So we can run this. Let me just clear the logs. So let's run. So you can see this is successful. So if we refresh the schema, the column admission date is going to change to admission year. So let's refresh. You can see it has changed to admission year. So now what we are going to do is to drop the column admission year. So we want to remove this column. So let's use alter table students. Then we'll use the drop clause, drop column clause, the name of the column that we want to remove, admission year. So if we run this, it's going to remove admission year column. So it's also successful run. So let's refresh. You will see that we'll remain with only 2 column names. So we've just looked on how we can use alter table to make some modifications on a table in a database. By now you should be very comfortable working with data definition language, that is create, drop, and alter. So see you into the next lecture, where we are going to start looking at data manipulation language.